Hello, this is Gudmund. Welcome back or welcome to the channel. Today we are going to be reading Leif the Lucky by Ingrid and Edgar Perrin de Laurie. Hard name to say. I think I said it right. Anyways, let's get to it. Kind of looks like a Norse thing about, Vikings or something. I don't know. Alright, Alex, I'm ready. Leif the Lucky. Alright. Interesting. I don't see any groundhogs. I see a reindeer, I see an owl, seal, bunny rabbits, an owl. I think that's, I don't know what that is up there. Maybe a panther. I see a fox, crow, a squirrel, polar bear. Yeah, alright. Goodness gracious. 1,000 years ago, when the Vikings roamed the seas, led by the Norse gods, there lived a man in Norway, called Eric the Red. He was able and strong, but his temper was wild, and after a fight he was banned from Norway. So he sailed to Iceland. There he built a farm, found a wife, and lived in peace for a while. But then he began to quarrel and fight again. It wasn't long before he had to flee from Iceland too. Now Eric sailed off into the unknown sea toward the setting sun. There, behind a wall of ice, he found a new land. Eternal ice and snow covered most of the land, but the banks of the fjords were green with grass. No men, no houses he found. But on the edge of the ice lay sleek seals of snoring walruses. I'd be snoring there. And polar bears, foxes, and hares hurried silently, like shadows over the icy wastes. This seemed to Eric a good land for fierce Vikings who kept their peace best when far away from neighbors. He sailed back to Iceland for his wife and his sons. And after his friends had listened for a while to his stories of the vast green lands he had found, many decided to move there with him. Eric the Red had 3 sons. The one was called Thorstein, the second Thorvald, and the third was called Leif. And this is the story of Leif, Eric's son, who sailed with his father to Greenland, and who later sailed still farther west and found the continent of America. Alrighty. Interesting designs there. I was wondering if that was his hair up there. And I was thinking maybe it was like his hoodie, but I guess it's his hair. Leif stood on sturdy feet in the prow of his father's Viking ship as he sailed across the snowstorm sea. The brine stung his tan cheeks and the wind tore at his hair. His eyes were keen and the eyes of a snake, and blue as steel as he watched the rows of waves rising like 1,000 fences between him and his new home in the west. Ooh, look at those fish flopping around. Ooh, there's a starfish on the ground right down there. Oh, you can't see it, but ooh. It's a funny looking Viking. Leif's father, Eric the Red, stood at the rudder himself and steered his ship with huge fists. He led the way for 24 ships that sailed after him. As he sailed ahead for 24 chieftains were moving with him to new land he had found. On all the ships there was a great squeeze of people and cattle and fodder and food. On Eric's ship were his wife and his children, his servants and thralls and everything that belonged to him. Look, there's a seal. Kinda looks like you, Gudmund. Huh? No, it does not. I look better than that. I mean, he looks pretty cute, you know. Alright, never mind. Ooh, look at that. Okay. For days they sailed through the mountains of waves and through valleys of water, and Leif saw nothing but sea and sky and drifting ice. Then one day he spied far, far away a mountain sticking out of the sea. Yes, soon the others saw. Ooh, what is that thing? Looks kinda cool. It too, and Eric told Leif to hurry and take the dragon head off the prow of the ship, for gaping heads and yawning snouts anger the spirits of land, said Eric. Head over heels, Leif climbed up and took off the dragon head. I'm just kidding. But still, Leif wasn't fast enough. The spirits of the land had seen the dragon head, and all of a sudden the mountain coughed. Huge waves rushed out toward the ships. Icebergs crashed into each other with a clang and sting, and a din as fast as all the glass in the world were broken to pieces. The waves dashed over the ships, and the wind howled. Men shouted, girls cried, cows mooed, pigs squealed. Oink oink. Leif had held onto the dragon head and tried to steady the cattle. Eric stayed as if he nailed to the rudder and steered his sharp ship so it wound its way over the waves like a serpent. Many ships sank or gave up and turned back, but Eric and 13 other chieftains arrived safely in Greenland. Oh, look at that cow. I know it's a bull. Could you lift it up so they can see? Oh, there we go. See the bull? Oh my god, this little mouse. Ooh. They sailed into the deep fjord and landed at steep green slope. Trip, tap, trap, trip, trap. Down the gangplank people and animals rushed to get their feet on solid ground. Fair are those slopes, and here we shall build, said Eric the Red. Fair is the smell of porridge pot. Thought Leif to himself, they couldn't build a fire to cook any food on the ships. Then they all ate their porridge and drank from the brooks, and the animals grazed on the sunny slopes. Ooh. The other chieftains soon sailed off and took land for themselves in the other fjords. Eric himself stayed at Bratali, the steep green slope. There he built his farm and ruled like a king over servants and thralls, and nobody ruled over him but his gods. He sacrificed to Odin, the all-wise and the red-bearded Thor, and asked them to stand by him. And Leif knew that his father's fierce gods had come with them. For then when the northern lights flamed into the dark winter nights, he could see the gods racing across the skies. There he saw Odin riding to battle, one-eyed and huge on his 8-legged horse. And there came thunder god Thor, in his billy goat cart, swinging his hammer and driving his goats so fast that the lightning flew from the hoofs and thunder roared. That's pretty cool. I like the artwork. Leif grew up in Greenland and became strong and cunning as a chieftain's son should be. He sailed his ship through his spear and swung his axe from his father. He learned to be swift as an arrow and quiet as a mouse. He dressed his boat in polar bear skins so that he looked like a chunk of floating ice. And went hunting seal and walrus. For hours he sat still and silent at a hole in the ice, waiting for a seal to come off for air. But sometimes he became so excited that he forgot, and whispered under his breath, "I'll catch you," and then the seal was gone. When the winter storms soared over the house, he played around the fire with a white bear cub. Then he needed all his skill, but the bear was strong and tough, too, and Eric laughed until his stiff, frozen beard tinkled like bells. When he came home from hunting with 6 man's load on his shoulders. Okay. Oh, look at that polar bear. Oh, I'm wondering if those seals are alive. Right there. They look like I think if they were not alive, they'd have X's on their eyes. I kind of hope they're alive. No, I think they are. They are. Oh, hold on. Alright, we're good to go. Eric himself fought no more, for now he was the first man in Greenland, and all over the other Norsemen there came to ask his advice and judgment. When merchantmen came sailing from Norway and Iceland, he received them well. They stayed with him all winter long. He made big feasts in all his hall, and there at the long fire Leif heard many stories from the outer world as he grew up. Leif was all ears with a sailor named Bjorn. I think Bjarne. It might be Bjarne. Told how he had lost his course on his voyage to Greenland and had sighted forest-clad shores still further west. Eric and all his men made fun of Bjarne, for he had not even had the curiosity to land anywhere. But for many years they talked about the land he had seen. By the time Leif had grown to husky youth, there ruled a king in Norway whose name was Olav. I'm going to try to say it. Tryggvason. I know there's like silent letters in here. Tryggvason. I don't know if the G is silent. Tryggvason. Something. You see it right there. That word right there. TR. Tryggvason. And now the sailors who came to Greenland were telling about his deeds. He was 1 head taller than his tallest man, and generous and gay, but very violent when he was angry. No greater athlete had ever been known. I guess he's having a dream. He could throw 2 spears at once. Yes, he could play with 3 swords and run along the blades of the oars while his men rowed the ship. By day and by night, Leif dreamed of the glorious king, and wanted to sail his court. Oh, look at that hair. It's on fire. Ships were scarce in Greenland, for there were no woods, but last Leif got a ship of his own set out. He sailed straight east to the islands west of Scotland, and when fair winds came again, he sailed on to Nidaros in Norway. Like Nidaros Cathedral. Alex has been there. In Nidaros, everything was great and fine, from houses and wharves. People watched Leif as he stopped ashore with all his rare gifts for the king. A Greenland falcon perched on his fist, and a white bear cub walked at his heels. Then came his men with homespuns and furs and walrus tusks and ropes of walrus hides so strong that 60 men couldn't tear them apart. Leif went on till he came to the door of the king's hall. There he stopped to comb his hair, and waited till the king had eaten his fill, for thus it was best to approach the king. He had learned from his father. In the great hall, King Olav sat at table with his men, and he was still handsomer than Leif had thought. Oh, look at that polar bear cub. How cute looking. Oh my goodness. Hey Lex, is that little rat? No, I think that's a dog. Oh, okay. A cute looking little rat. Oh, look at that guy. He looks kind of funny looking. Kind of does. Now it was a strict rule at court that as soon as the king put aside his knife and spoon, everyone else had to stop eating too. But there sat at the table a little fat man who was so busy eating he didn't even have time to look up. I'm assuming it's that one right there. Oh, and he's looking over. Oh my goodness, there's a pig's head. I don't know how I like that about that. One of my friends is a pig. Really, actually. Yeah, his name is Babe, I think. Anyways. Oh, look at that dog. Very... kind of looks like a mix. When the king saw this offense against his royal rule, he moved his eyebrows up and down in wrath. All his men turned pale. He shall eat till he burst, growled the king, and ordered his servants to put huge vats of porridge before the man. Eat it all up, roared the king. The man ate till his belt buckle burst, his cheeks turned blue, and even his shoelaces flew apart. Then he threw himself on his knees. Kill me, sir king. Oh, goodness gracious. But not with porridge, begged the man. Thinking, Olav couldn't help laughing, and all his men laughed with him. And the little fat man was spared. Now King Olav noticed Leif standing in the doorway with all his sons, with all his strange gifts. Highly pleased, he gave him a sign to approach. The king saw at once that Leif was a well-mannered youth, asked him to stay at his court. He showed him great favours, and that winter Leif took part in all the games, and saw for himself all the king's feasts that no other man could equal. King Olav had taken the Christian faith and served most of his men. The king told Leif of the full glory and strength in this Christian faith, and of how the White Christ conquered Odin and Thor and chased them into the underworld. So Leif was Christianed, and when spring came, the king asked him to return home and take the Christian faith to Greenland. In great friendship, the king washed Leif. Goodspeed gave him many gifts. Among these were the Hague and Heki, 2 Scottish thralls who could run faster than any deer. Use them if ever you need anyone who can travel fast, said King Olav, and Leif hoisted his sail and steered straight to the west, for now he wanted to do a feat that no other sailor had done before, and sail without stop from Norway to Greenland. But in a great storm the waves rose so high they nudged the moon, and the ship swayed like a rocking horse. For a long time it was thrown about on the sea. Oh, look at that. Oh my goodness, look at that cloud. That's the kind of cloud that I see when I look out the window down the cars. There'll be big, giant clouds and people in the cars. It's just cloudy. Then the wind calmed down and heavy fog fell over them. Leif could see neither whales nor the sun, nor the colour of the sea guide his way. But he sailed on thinking, if I don't find Greenland, maybe I'll find the land that Bjarne saw. At last the fog lifted enough for Leif's keen eyes to pierce it. And there, straight ahead, he saw land. It was beautiful land with forests of strange trees growing all the way down to the shores. No one shall laugh at us, as they laughed at Bjarne, and say we didn't explore the land, said Leif. So he sailed up to the shore and landed at the mouth of the river. Gudmund, this is where groundhogs live. Really? Oh, I like this. He sent Hake and Heki to run all over the hills, and when they came back, it said they had seen neither people nor smoke from fires. Leif and his men went ashore and built themselves houses. All through the summer they lived in great plenty and were carefree and did nothing but enjoy the land, for it was so rich that wild grains and grapevines and all kinds of fruits grew there. And Leif gave the land a name and called it Vinland, or Wineland. The sun stood so high in the sky that Leif knew he was very far to the south. When fall came, he loaded his ship with grapes and precious lumber, sailed off toward the north, and little toward the east. So well did he guide his ship, that when he had sailed for a while he sighted the Greenland glaciers. But suddenly he changed his course, and his men asked, "Why do you sail so close to the wind?" "Don't you see anything?" said Leif. "I see a ship or a cliff." "Yes." Then they saw it too, and it was a cliff, but Leif saw further than the others. He saw that people were shipwrecked there, and close to the wind, right up the rock, Leif steered his ship and saved them all much of their goods. Then he sailed home to Bratali, and when Eric the Red saw Leif's ship, he mounted his horse and rode to shore to give his son a stately welcome. From far and near people came to hear about Vinland and about Leif's deeds and adventures, and from this time on he was called Leif the Lucky. But Eric grumbled in his beard when he heard that Leif was taking the new faith and had come to home to Christian them all. The old gods were good enough for him. Leif's mother soon became a Christian and built a church at Bratali, and Leif introduced Christianity all over Greenland. Also in this he showed himself a good man and leader. Later he made another voyage to Vinland, and his brothers Torvald and Thorstein sailed for Vinland too, but one never found his way and the other never returned. Then Gudrid, the widow of Thorstein, came to Bratali to live. She was as gentle as she was lovely, and a soothsayer, and had promised her great fortune, or great future, in a distant land. One summer, a merchantman called Torfinn Kjolsven hold on, I gotta try to say this. Torfinn Karlsevn. It's not Sven. Hold on. Karl. Never mind. Karl something like that. Never mind. Came sailing his ship to Bratali. Torfinn soon fell in love with Gudrid. As soon he was rich and high-born, he was so well received when he asked her in marriage. And that winter it was decided that Torfinn and Gudrid should sail to Vinland and make their home there. Leif helped them in every way. He told them how to sail, sent with them some of his sailors, and also Hake and Heki, and said they could use his houses in Vinland. In spring, Torfinn and Gudrid set off. With them sailed 2 more ships and 150 Norsemen with cattle and household goods. Oh, look at that, some penguins. And a bunch of eggs. Better not step on them. Oh, there's all those mice. Or white foxes, I don't know. They sailed west over dark waters till they came to land with 4 frosted mountains. The shores were covered with stone slabs so big that 2 men could lie upon them and kick each other with their feet. Sorry about that. And from behind each slab, sly foxes peeped. Oh, the foxes. Okay. Yeah, peeping. Yep. From Stone Slab Land they sailed southward till they came to another land that was covered by dense forest guarded by ferocious bears. From Forest Land they had sailed south along sandy shores that never seemed to come to an end. But at last they came to a fjord, and in the middle of the current there lay an island, and on the island there were so many birds and eggs, there was hardly room to put a foot. Crunch, 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 crunch. I'm just kidding. Now Torfinn sent out Haig and Hagi. After 3 days they came running back with grapevines and wisps of grains in their hands. Then Torfinn knew that they weren't far away from Vinland, the good. Here Torfinn and his people put ashore their cattle to graze, and even when winter came there was grass, for it wilted but a little. Even when winter came, there was grass, for it wilted but a little. Look, it looks like they're making eggs. Oh well. That winter, a baby boy was born to Gudrid and Torfinn. Torfinn put his son on his knees and named him Snorre. And this Snorre was the first white child ever born in America. When spring came, Torfinn led the ships still further south, and now they came to Vinland the Good. Here they all liked it and settled down to live, and Snorre grew up big and strong in the sun. But on a fair day when everything was all pleasure and joy, the Norsemen saw a number of skin boats rounding the point to the south. In the boats were dark-skinned people with black and unkempt hair. They all had sticks in their hands which they whirled to the right. It sounded as if they were threshing. Maybe this is a sign of peace, said one of Torfinn's men, and the Norsemen held the white shields towards them, for this was their sign of friendship. The natives came ashore and they gazed at each other. Then the natives jumped into their boats and paddled off again. I guess that's Norse. Alright. Skrællinga was what the Norsemen called these people. They saw no more of them for a while. Then the dark men came back in great numbers and wanted to barter fine furs. Gudrid gave them clabber and cream and cheese and butter, and they licked their fingers and traded beautiful furs for this milk food. They had never tasted before. Torfinn had brought big balls of red cloth. He cut it up into narrow strips and traded it. A foot for each fur. The Skrællinga all wanted a foot of this. All wanted a foot of this. He got just as much fur, yes, even more. When all the cloth was gone, the Norsemen had great heaps of furs, and the Skrællinga strutted about wrapped in red ribbons. Now Torfinn had a big bull that was grazing in the woods, and the sight of all the red cloth must have made the bull angry. Uh-oh. For all of a sudden, with a roar and a bellow, he charged straight for the Skralinger. I don't know how to say the word. Skralinger, who had never seen a bull before, jumped and ran a race for the boats, and much offended they paddled away. Torfinn and his men laughed till they fell on their backs. Not very nice. What is that, a blueberry? I don't know. But they didn't laugh when 3 weeks later the Skralinger came paddling back in such great numbers that it looked as if coals were strewn on the water. Now they all yelled and whirled their sticks fiercely to the left. Then the Norsemen grasped their red shields and ran to meet them in battle, for they weren't meant to shun a fight, whatever the numbers against them. The Skralinger leaped from the boats and slung something huge and black toward the Norsemen. It looked like a black ball, or rather more like a giant sheep's belly. It hissed over their heads and came down among the terrible crash. This didn't seem natural to the Norsemen. Great fear came over them and they turned and ran. But now it seemed that even the trees were turning into Skralinger. Whether they ran, the Norsemen were spellbound and confused, but the women were not. They urged the men to fight, and when the Skralinger saw a Viking woman sharpening a sword on her own skin, they in turn were startled and fled. A bunch of whales. From now on, the Norsemen didn't feel safe in Vinland, and they longed for their homeland far away in the north. It was cold and barren there, but it belonged only to them and their people. Soon they decided to return. They loaded their ships with timber and furs and sailed northward. Now they saw Skralinger whenever they came close to shore. One day they caught 2 boys, and Torfinn took them along in his ship. They sailed past the Birds Island, and they sailed past Forest Land, and they sailed past Stone Slab Land, and they sailed again over dark waters back to Greenland. And while the ice closed in around Greenland and locked it away from the rest of the world, they all sat together again in the smoke-filled hall on Batoli. Leif sat in high seat now, for Eric the Red had died old, full of days, and Leif played with Snorre and listened to the Vinland stories. The 2 Skralinger boys soon learned the language, and they told many stories about their people. They had no houses, they said, but lived in holes and dens, and were ruled by 2 kings who were called Ovaldaman and Volidida. The Norsemen all agreed that the natives made the new lands too dangerous to live in, but it would be good to send ships there for timber, as the voyage to Vinland and Forest Land was much shorter than that to Norway. When spring came, Torfinn sailed to Norway with Gudmund and Snorre, and there he sold his fine furs and fancy woods for much silver and gold. Rich and respected, he and Gudmund settled down in Iceland, where Snorre grew up, soon forgetting his far-away birthplace. Leif stayed in Greenland as long as he lived. He was highly honored, and even after his death, the story of Leif the Lucky, the first white man who discovered America, lived on. For hundreds of years after Leif's time, the ships of the Norsemen on Greenland plowed the northern seas to bring timber from America's forests. Then came many years of cold weather all over the world, and the patches of grass on Greenland grew smaller and smaller. Also the cattle grew smaller. They had less to eat. The horses became as small as ponies. The cows became almost as small as goats. Even the tall Norseman grew smaller. The son became smaller than his father, and his son became smaller again, for they had neither porridge nor bread to eat. As they grew smaller, they also lost their skill and forgot how to make sturdy seagoing ships. Without good ships, they could neither sail to Norway for food nor to America for timber to build new ships. And at last they had only small boats made of skin for fishing in Greenland fjords. Soon everybody had forgotten about the Norsemen in Greenland. And several hundred years later, when sailors from Norway again came to Greenland, they found no Norsemen, but in their place squat-legged Eskimos waddling in the ice and snow. Though the story of Leif the Lucky was written down in old manuscripts, nobody read them for hundreds of years. As the Norsemen in Greenland were forgotten, so were the stories of Vinland, and still for many hundred years, the Indians in America could enjoy their land in peace. Alrighty. Known for the vibrant and imaginative interpretations of Scandinavian folklore, Greek and Norse mythology, and American history, the books of Ingrid, 1904 to 1980, and Edgar Perrin Delore, 1898 to 1986, have entertained readers for more than 75 years. The couple made frequent trips to Norway, where they gathered inspiration from many of their most celebrated books, including Children of the North Lights, Minnesota 2012, East of the Sun and West of the Moon. The last name's hard to say. Dolores, Book of Norse Myths, Dolores, Book of Trolls, and Olav, Minnesota 2013. The Dolores received the Caldecott Medal in 1940 for the big book Abraham Lincoln, and were later awarded Regina Medal for their distinguished contribution to children's literature. Alright. I think that's going to be it for this video. I hope you liked Leif the Lucky, and I'd like to read more books in the future. Alrighty, well, have a good day, good night, and me and Alex will see you in the next one. Goodbye.